Hello and welcome back, my partners in crime. Welcome to Murder Analysed for another true crime case. Plus you can also catch this on my podcast, Let's Have a Chat About Murder, as with other things that's coming up on that podcast, which goes more into detail about some of these perpetrators that we've been discussing throughout about 200 cases now. So there's going to be some more things on there. But today's serious crime, really, when you think about it, and we talk about the Halloween time, and people dress up, don't they, and they talk about the horrors, and they have all the scary movies on the telly. What we talk about is true crime, isn't it? It's the true horrors in society, really. This one is so historic, really. It's the first American serial killer, really, to be classed as that, I suppose. Made the history books. He's just an awful man when you really have a look at this case and the mentality of this man, this charismatic man, this slight build man, I think 5'7" he was in stature. But it's about his mind, isn't it? It's about why he killed this man and how many he killed, because it's not really known how many he killed. As we go through this story of this case and the details of what he done, it just shows you, doesn't it, how depraved some people really are. Now, psychopaths and serial killers and all this stuff do crimes for many different reasons. Some do it for no reason at all. Some are just, I suppose, born to kill, if you want to say that. I think with this Dr. H.H. Holmes, or Henry Holmes, that's his second name. We'll talk about his earlier names in a minute. But when we look at him and why he murdered, first of all, it's about, I think, fantasies with him. He's from a young child, he always wanted, to be in medicine, and that was his focus, so he says, or so it seems. But when we look at the 1800s and how the medical boards and the universities training these doctors and stuff, how they use bodies, real bodies, to dissect and stuff like that, did that have pushed these fantasies that he was probably already having to another level? I think it probably did. You can't work on a dead body and dissect it and de-skin it and God knows what else you're going to do to these bodies, under the, because you're training to be a doctor for like 40 hours a week, and not have some issues if you're already that way inclined. And I think from that you'll see where he sort of started doing that, and then how his fantasies changed to reality, and how then he sort of dissociated human beings, people that even he knew. He disassociated them from being live human people with lives and families and stuff, to where he saw them as commodities, because these bodies were worth money, you see. And how he starts then to change. There's not a lot written about the last lot of victims, which were the women and the children that he killed. There's a lot wrote on, these bodies that were brought in, and he would buy and sell bodies, or sell bodies in the end, and the fresher the body, the less damage the body had to them. They was worth more money. He was killing people because he wanted the perfect body to sell, and they was worth about $30 in them days. It was quite a lot of money, wasn't it? And then where they may not want the whole body, they may have wanted parts of that body, like the eyes or the organs. He then decided that he would then make the skeletons out of the bodies and sell them for about $120. So yes, at first it does look like his crimes were financially motivated crimes, but that never was the case, I think, for him. He enjoyed the kill. He did, and he perfected that kill by building this hotel, or so-called hotel, that he had, which was like the perfect way to not only kill but to dispose of them bodies, and also then like a factory on the basement of it to then sell them bodies onto medical facilities for used for up and coming doctors to experiment and look at how the human body worked. So this was a very intelligent serial killer, without a doubt, right? He was a very intelligent man. He also, I suppose, when we look then at the latter part, just before he got caught, a couple of years before he got caught, of his killings, how he changed, how his fantasies changed. Now, as I've said before, killers kill for many reasons, and serial killers kill for many reasons. And I think what Holmes got from the first lot of killings was sexual gratification from the kill itself, from the dissection, the kill, the selling, making money. There was always an extra part to that. It wasn't just financial. There would have always been an inner feeling of something else for him to kill like he did. When we look at the women and the children in these victims, he was one, I suppose, not only was he the first serial killer that you could say, but he was also one of the first stalkers in women. He stalked women, really stalked women. If he found you attractive and stuff, he would stalk you enough to where he would get you. He would, romance you and everything else. And if you didn't agree to his sexual advances, he would rape you, without a doubt, and then kill you. So his whole he evolved, didn't he, really, as a serial killer. From a serial killer just doing it for financial gain, or so he says, or so it reads. But there would have been underlying issues there with that anyway. And it would have always been about the kill, that gratification. He needed something. These fantasies that he was having even from then needed to be fulfilled. To where they wasn't fulfilling him anymore on the last lot of murders that he did, to where he went then for women. And that was sexual gratification. The kill was even for that. So this man is, it says that he killed or confessed to 27 murders. And it is believed really as he killed probably more around 200 victims. It could even be more, because don't forget, this man was killing people to sell for medical reasons, to make money off them bodies, $30, and then to make them into skeletons, $130. You see, the motive was there. He was such a deceitful, he was a criminal through and through, right? He really was. There's no doubt about it. The difference with this serial killer, with Holmes, than with other killers, it's the way that he designed his killing field. He didn't want to have to go out in the streets and kill. He designed his so-called hotel as a way to attract the victims in, and also to take their money, because he wanted that as well, and then to dispose of them bodies in one place. I mean, give it to him. In the 1800s or 1893, in this World Fair of Chicago, where Chicago was booming at this point, and was thousands of people, descending on this city of Chicago. Really, this man had worked it out, that the only way to make a living and to also, live his fantasy out was to build this property, which is all brought on murder victims' money, on deceit, on fraud, on theft. There's so much about this man. It's a really interesting case when you look at this man as, yes, a serial killer, as a psychopath, because that's what he was, on the way that he felt that he could do this. It's amazing, really, this case, of how extreme and how far some of these killers would go, even then, really, to get away with murder. And to tell the truth, he did. It was only when he changed and went for women for other reasons, not just their money, but for the sexual gratification of it, that he got caught. So God knows, if this man had not been caught when he did, how many more and what other schemes this man would have brought out to take murder to a totally different stage. And this is what separates this case from other cases of serial killers. All of that separates this man from other serial killers. So this is the case of Dr. H.H. Holmes, the first American serial killer. Born in 1861 and died in 1896. He was born in New Hampshire in the United States of America. He was, I think his alias, as most of you know, was Holmes, but he was Herman Webster Mudgett at the time of his birth. That was his name, and we'll go through why he had to change his name. Again, another fraud, another criminal side to this man as he went through that. But yeah, I think when we look at this elaborate, murder castle, and we think about him and the people in his life that had suffered, and also most of his victims that we know of that he admitted to are people he knew. The other victims are not. The other victims were really just about monetary gain, to use that body to sell to then the universities and stuff for medical examination and stuff like that in their teaching. So I think the 27 people he had to admit, and the rest, no, he didn't, because he really just saw them as commodities. He just really saw them as money, as a way to make money. He probably knew nothing about them. He just wanted their bodies, or their bodies to be used as skeletons to make money. Sometimes when you think about serial killers, and we look at serial killers, in a real in-depth way, really, about why they do certain things. We can justify some things because you can say, okay, you couldn't help it or whatever. He wasn't mad, He was a very clever man. He wasn't mad. He knew exactly what he was doing was wrong, but he still did it. Some killers have diagnosis of this, that and the other. With him, I think he was so intelligent that he perfected this art of killing and really played on it until it didn't work anymore. It's strange when you look at the ending of this man, because he was caught in the end, and we'll go into that. But his own body, you see, he wanted to be buried under concrete, so no one that could dissect his body. Strange that, isn't it? When you can alienate the people the victims that you've done, you've disassociated from them as being human. You've decided that you can do whatever you want to them. But when it comes to your body, and the way that you want to die, and the way that you want to be buried and protected, it's one rule for you and one rule for them. Typical serial killer, really. So let's have a look at his early life now. So Holmes was born, as I said, in New Hampshire, and he was born as Herman Webster Mudgett, and in May, I think, 16th, 1861. He was born into a sort of an affluent family, really. He enjoyed the privileges of childhood. He wasn't poor, and as I said, at this time in Chicago, it was quite a good time. The financial hardships hadn't hit then as they did later on down the line. So he had a really good upbringing as far as that was concerned. He wasn't short of anything. He was not neglected or anything like that. So, and a lot of people, we look back, don't we, when we look at serial killers, and we look at their backgrounds to see what's happened. But it has been said that he was quite an unusual lad, but he was also very, very intelligent. And at very early stages, really, he wanted always sort of to go into medicine. He had this fascination, really, for medicine, but also in the body, the human body, and how it worked and that sort of things. It was reported that very early on that he would practice surgery on animals, and some indicate that at that early stage, even in his youth, there was a death of a friend that he may have had some connection to, but because there's no evidence on that. So from quite an early age there were signs of his interest, can we say, in dissecting of bodies and stuff like this, because he started with animals from a very young age. And I suppose in that era no one was looking at when you're hurting an animal and doing different things to animals, because he continued to say that he wanted to be a go into medicine. This was accepted, I suppose, by the family, even though they may not, and people around may not have thought it was a great thing to do. It was sort of excused because of his continuous, he wanted to be in this medicine, and that was the way in them days that it was done. They would experiment on dead bodies, and so I suppose they just thought, oh well, it's getting him used to what he's going to have to do later. But now we understand that sometimes most serial killers do not, or they don't treat animals well, should I say. They don't. Their fascination with the kill or with dissection or something starts very early, and it's usually against animals, because animals really can't protect themselves, can they really? And they're quite vulnerable, as with some of these victims, or with his victims that he made them later on. And how he made them vulnerable was by using different techniques to really make sure they couldn't move. Now, when we think about Holmes wanting to be this doctor, or this Mudgett wanting to be a doctor early on, he come from sort of not a bad background and stuff, but to be a doctor in them times, really you would have come from a very wealthy background to be able to afford to go to these universities, these medical schools, to hone your skills and stuff like this, and learn about how to become a doctor or a surgeon and stuff. It was about $200 I think per year or per term. Quite a lot of money in the 1800s, quite a lot. And so right from an early age he knew that he couldn't really afford that, and his family couldn't really afford that. So in his mind, this is where we know he is very manipulative, this man, because in his mind he thought, I need to marry up. I need to marry someone wealthy to be able to get me through that medical school, pay for that, so that I can become the person that I want to be. Don't forget, I don't think that he'd never not had these fantasies, right? He was always a serial killer in there. But I think what honed his skills then was going to these medical schools, medical university, college, and learning these sort of skills. But that's how he paid for it. So he married the sort of the wealthiest woman in the town, really, and made sure that he had enough money that he could do that. So there's his manipulation already starting from a very young age. Now this man was meant to be a very good looking man, as I said, about 5'7". Not the biggest sort of man, but he was a very charismatic, very intelligent, well-spoken man. And of course the woman that he married was happy to marry him and happy to pay for his college fees and stuff to be a medical doctor, because really it would have benefited everyone in the end if this man had been a decent man and really have stayed with this woman for love, not just for the money. That he could have had a really good life. But I don't think that was ever on the cards for him at all. He only used this woman for the money to pay for that education, to move on to other things. He was such a manipulator from a very early age. And I think that sort of shows just how a manipulator he was, and how his thought pattern was already very selfish, narcissistic. It was always about him. So this is where I think he learned and understood about how to get these bodies, or why he should get dead bodies and sell them then to these universities, because of the money they were worth. She had money, his wife, but she couldn't really afford that sort of money and his lifestyle on top. So he was struggling to pay these fees even with her money at this time. He needed to make more money. Now these universities had someone within there, you know, not as a teacher, but as like a morgue keeper who used to have to get bodies for the medical students to do their examinations on. And this is where the idea comes from, I think, with him, of how to make money, because he recognised where these bodies were coming from. He wanted to know all about it, how much they were getting paid for it, and he made a sort of a friendship with the sort of morgue keeper, I suppose you'd like to call him, that could give him access to these bodies, but also he would give this man bodies for money. Now, it's a dark era, I think, when we look into medicine and the, you know, education in medicine. It wasn't well known, you know, what was really going on and how these doctors were practicing, or trainee doctors were practicing. You know, and it's not such a highlighted thing when you think about it now, but in them days, how else was they meant to learn? They didn't have Google that you could look up, and you know, and but the books that were written from the details taken from the corpses that they were using, you know, to extract information and diagrams and stuff of how the body worked. That was how the medical association, everything, used to use these bodies for, you know, them purposes only. They wasn't used for any other purposes. Problem is with that, where you have money involved, there's always going to be some sort of crime. And I think the worst thing, what happened there, was that the man that was allowing these bodies in and buying these bodies wasn't really asking where the bodies came from. You know, it was just, oh, we've got a couple of bodies, here you go, that sort of thing. So it, you know, I think, yeah, for the medical, you know, history, it's not great. But I don't think at that point they could have done anything else. They could have managed the bodies better, I think. They should have found out at least where these bodies were coming from. Because really in them days, if you wanted to kill someone, get rid of a body, you'd just sell it to them for medical purposes, wouldn't you? And that's exactly, really, at first, he didn't do that at first, to tell you the truth. What he did do was dig up, you know, fresh bodies that had been buried, people that had died. They would dig them up and then sell them to them. But you know, how many dead bodies can you dig up that are really still worth the money? Because really you can't have them, you know, being embalmed. You can't have them really being damaged. Usually natural causes would have been the best way to have these bodies. You know, someone that had died from natural causes or old age, something like that. Not people that's had their head smashed in or, you know, stabbed to death, because you've destroyed the organs that they're trying to look at. So this is where he come up with the idea, well, rather than digging up these bodies, I'm just going to kill them, kill people for money. And that's really where this all come from. And there was another student with him in that era in this university that made him, you know, I think, and it's a lot of people have said, is when you are working 20, 30 hours a week and you are you're either side of a body on a slab and you're dissecting that body, you have a close relationship with the you know, your partner, don't you? Your, you know, study partner and the person that's also dissecting these parts of bodies. And so within these conversations, as they were doing this, came up the conversation that, well, we could get bodies and make money to pay our fees. So this is how he starts drawing in other people. And the problem is with that, the bodies can't again be damaged. I think his first kill was when he killed someone and he literally smashed his skull in with a pipe. But it turned out that he couldn't use that body then for that. His skull was smashed in. So he had to think of another way to kill these people. And that's where he started to use chemicals and different stuff like that, so that the bodies were protected and still worth the money. But he had performed the murder. He had killed these people. And I think this got hard for him to do, to tell you the truth, right? not in the way that he killed them, because he was happy to kill them. But there was, you know, a lot going on at this time. He'd lost money. He'd finished medical school, right? And he'd finished medical school really at the bottom of the pile. He wasn't a great doctor. He's never going to be one of the greats. I think the medical board had to have a meeting about whether to actually, you know, allow him to get his degree, really, because he was that low. But I think when you think back on him at university, he had so much else going on, didn't he? Really. He was constantly trying to make money, constantly trying to get bodies to either sell or kill, whatever he could do to make that money. So the concentration level on his studies would have been at the bottom of that, even though he wanted to do it. So when you then leave university with a very low level, especially as a doctor in them times, when you didn't come from a great family or an influential family that could really help you, and you know, you'd go into their practice and you'd be a great surgeon and stuff. He then found himself working like in a chemist and stuff. Because he wasn't a great doctor, and his grades wasn't great, as I said. So now he finds himself with not a lot of money. He's now left the wife that he used to get him through medical school, and now he finds himself with not a lot. Now, an issue with serial killers is, and we spoke before about serial killers, is when they're put under pressure or there's stresses in their lives. And I think at this point, this was the real stress for him, because the financial stress that he was having. Also, he had ended the relationship with this marriage because really he only married her for the money. And I think he felt he made a mistake by doing that. Maybe he felt, oh, I should have stayed there a little bit longer, but he didn't. So a lot of things were coming on top of him then. You know, this wasn't the way it was meant to go for him. So these stresses, these financial stresses, really then made him think, I need to make some money, and I need to make some money really quickly. So what he decided to do, his plan was to insure someone for money and then kill them and then have that money. But he couldn't find anyone really like that. Then his other idea was, well, I'm going to kill myself, which he tried to do, and he ended up going into a psychiatric unit for about 2 months. I think all part of his plan. He wasn't a stupid man, he knew what he was doing. And he was released after about 2 months, and then decided, right, now it's time for me to end my life, because he's insured himself for £10,000, and he wanted to end his life and literally start again. So this is when he became H.H. Holmes, and he got £10,000 from the insurance company for his own death. So now his whole past history is gone. It's gone. Now we have a man, a serial killer, really, a psychopath now, with £10,000 in 1850s, really, who wants to build somewhere and invest in something that's going to make him more money. And that's what he did. That's when he started to build. He bought some land. He started then to build this, what they call a hotel. It was shops on the bottom, to tell you the truth. And then I think they had a basement, and that's really what his kill site was. But the shops on the bottom, which he let out, I think he had a barber shop and he had a chemist shop. He had different things there, which were bringing in the money. Then he moved, I think it was 4 stories, and on the top floor he'd let out rooms and stuff like this. And the other, I think he had his own rooms on there, but one floor was then designed, this hotel, as a kill site. So he had different builders coming in, so no one knew, you know, from one stage to the next what was happening. Each builder built something different, and so these rooms, his rooms, were really interconnecting. And then he had a bathroom on his floor that had a trap door, really, that he could get rid of the bodies and bring them down to the basement level without anyone knowing what was really going on in this place. Now, when you look at this man from a point of view, extraordinary really, wasn't he? Really, in this day and age, right, in the 1800s, a man's come, really change his life, start again, and then to think, I can't kill these people out in the street because I can't make money by doing that. I'm going to build a property where on one part of it I'm making money from leasing these properties out, running these shops. I'm on the top part, I'm leasing out rooms and apartments and stuff like that. But these floors in between and the basement is going to be where I kill people. And that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did. And really all on the money from faking his own death really started that off. But then he needed, didn't he, to keep up the hotel, to keep up the building expenses, to keep up everything. So yes, he did then start to murder people literally just to sell their bodies and their skeletons and everything else. He had everything in there that he needed to make that as a proper business, really. For killing people was a financial gain to this man on a massive level. He also tortured people because he put gas chambers in and he used to torture people and extort money out of people and stuff. That's what he did to finance his industry, you could call it, because in his mind that's what it was. That's really what it was. This man earned over, I think, $500,000 in his time that he killed, in them few years that he killed. The money that he extracted and fortunately took these people's money, killed them for that money, around $500,000 in the 1800s. But it was never enough. You see, the fantasy was still not being fulfilled because every time he reached his goal, it was never enough. And then when he started then killing people he knew for that money, using them for their money, killing families because families were worth money and under insurance, weren't they? If you didn't just kill one, you may kill 2 or 3 or 4 in a family, including children, that you would then make more money from that. This man was a very sick individual, without a doubt. He really was. But he understood that not to get caught, he had to do it within this household. And as I said, what changed with him really was when he went on to, because he had this chemist and he had all these shops, and I think he started a women's employment agency because he was all for women's rights, even in that day and age. He was all for women's rights because he was fascinated with women. And it was a way for him, to get close to potential victims, really. So there's a lot more to this H.H. Holmes than what people really realise. He had his fingers in so many pies, but it was always to benefit him, and it was always to make sure that he had enough victims for him to get to. Now, there was so many that we couldn't go through them all really, but the one I think that highlights the most is the case of his partner, or so-called partner, at the later stages in his crimes. So within this castle, really, this hotel, this murder castle as it's known, you had him meet up. I think he had met a couple and they had 3 children, and his name I think was Benjamin Purcell. And now again they had to move, or Holmes had to move then out of Chicago, for reasons being was that there was suspicion around. The police were sort of looking at him there, so because we had this new, the carnival sort of coming to town, all this, people around. A lot of people had gone missing. Lots of people had gone missing. So the police were starting to investigate, where are these people? Also, there was a lot of girls and stuff gone missing that used to work for him in these areas. One minute they was there, the next minute they were gone. And so the police were then sort of starting to look at him and at this hotel, because what happened was one day when he was shipping the bodies, getting the bodies ready to be taken to the university for the medical, people to have a look at, a police officer started questioning, what's this? What's happening here? With this stuff. And I think when they had a look downstairs, that there was body parts about, and he sort of explained that he'd done it for medical purposes. But by this stage now, Holmes is thinking, hang on a minute, right? Not only have I got that, but he had the gas chamber set up, certain rooms in that hotel set up, that with the gas pipe outside the room, so he could gas the people in the room and then dispose of them bodies through this sort of warren of different alleyways and different sort of ways that he could get rid of the bodies without anyone else noticing. He had the lime pit also down there. He had the big, furnace that he could destroy the bodies. He had acid. He had absolutely everything down there where he would strip the bones, then boil the bones and bleach the bones, to make these skeletons out of these bodies that he had killed. So he wasn't stupid. As I'm saying, this was an intelligent man that had designed this hotel, but now you can say the heat was on him, really. They wanted now to know sort of more about it. So what does he do? He burns it down, because he can't have that being seen. So then with this man that he's met and helped with this furnace and stuff like that, they decide then that, hang on, we've got to move. Now, he had killed this rich heiress and her sister, and she owned, I think, 50 acres or 500 acres of land elsewhere. Again, that he would have been left that money and that land from her. So we're going to say that this, Benjamin Purcell is dead, and we're going to claim insurance money from you, and we're going to start again in now a different county, a different state of America. That's what we're going to do. But the problem is that they couldn't find a body that looked like Benjamin, his so-called partner and friend. And he killed a few partners and friends in his time leading up to this part. To tell you the truth, really, this man didn't care whether he was a friend or not. It was all about survival for him, and now he needed that money that he'd insured not only Benjamin on, but also his wife and his children. So he's lured now Benjamin, so-called friend, partner and everything, and said, right, I've got a body, it's time now to plan your own death, fake your death. So of course Benjamin thought, this is great, okay, we're going to start again, and he was going to go off and he was going to start him and his wife were going to go off and start up this new part for him, and then Holmes would follow and everything else, and this was the big plan. But it wasn't Holmes's plan at all. Holmes's plan was that he was going to kill him because he wanted that £10,000. Plus he needed really that money so he could start again. And that was his whole thing. So this poor man, I'm telling you now, had a most terrible death. And I think Holmes has wrote about himself, about how he, screamed and begged for his life as he was being burnt. And I think he used acid on him. This was a torturous death that this man had. And that was the start then, I think, of his downfall, really. Because what then you have is the wife and the children now. And the wife, I think, was murdered, and then he murdered the young son of Benjamin, and then he murdered the two girls, which I think that they think this was his last lot of murders. But this is where, when we look at the murders of these people, of the women, and especially of these children, because he didn't any longer have his hotel with the gas chambers in it and that, he made this box that he had lined anyway, so that the blood and that wouldn't come out when he was transporting bodies. He sort of changed that box or chest into a gas chamber. Now, them two girls' bodies, the daughters of Benjamin, were stripped naked, and it has been said that he had sexually assaulted them before killing them as well. So don't think that this man only murdered for money. He did not. He was a sexual predator of women and children. He would have killed anyone at any time to get what he wanted. There was no way that this man was going to let anyone live, including children, if they could get caught or make him get caught. He just would not have it. He couldn't have it. But in the end, you see, that's what got him caught, because as he was taking these children to their father, he told them, they were writing home, and he took them off towards the Canadian border. They were writing letters back to who they thought was to their mum and dad about their journey. That's what they thought. He kept them letters, Holmes. He kept them. Now that's how they knew the trail of these kids and where they had been, and that's how they found their bodies. And they also found the younger brother who had been murdered. He had been put in the acid bath, and his body was shoved up a chimney somewhere, and they found that as well. So he was ending that part of his life at the end of their murders to move on to a different state, to continue killing and making another murder hotel, and then doing the same there until he was caught. I think it's for months, actually, for several weeks, Holmes was on the run, really, from the police and the authorities, because they knew something was going on. And Holmes, he was finally apprehended in November 1894. During his time in custody, he gave numerous stories to police, once admitted to killing 27 people, and convicted in 1895. Holmes appealed a lot of these cases, but he lost all the appeals. So the estimated total of his kills range from 20 to as many as 200 victims, or 27 to 200 plus victims. You know, when you think about him, you just think the number just could be anything, could that? The number, you know, because you just don't know, do you, what this man was really like. But anyway, Holmes died on the 7th of May in 1896 when he was hanged for the murder of Purcell, and he was buried in Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. Now, the thing is with him, when we look really as him being the most, or the first serial killer, he was really on record. But I'm sure there was probably many more people before him that didn't make the record. Because you had the police in, we have one police officer stands out in this case that really focused on him in them later stages to get this man, and that's what they did. So, you know, I think when you think about the amount of people that were at this exhibition, or this, you know, in Chicago, and the money at that time and what was around at that time, it was like a killing field for him. It really was. You had very, very wealthy people, lots of them. You had people that were disappearing left, right and centre. And so, gosh, we just don't know, do we, the real truth of what really happened. I think he's told a cellmate certain things about different kills and stuff that he had. But, you know, he was a serial killer. That's what he really was. And he changed his profile of a serial killer as he went along. I believe he always had fantasies of killing, without a doubt, from a very young age. Because he started off, didn't he, with the animals, and then went through. He had a fascination for dead bodies. He had a fascination for it. And being a medical doctor at that point was his way, I suppose, of having that accepted, that is a feeling that was all right, to marry up and marry someone that can then get you through that medical training, even though you really just got through really by the, you know, skin of your teeth, because you wasn't that great at them studies, because I think your mind, or his mind, was so mixed up with everything else that was going on in there to try and make monies, to kill, you know, and do all this, to sell these bodies. You know, he was a businessman, and that's how he liked himself to be seen, as a businessman. He was an outgoing, manipulative personality. He was a narcissist. Everything was about him. Everything. The 2 marriages he said, the second marriage when he married this other woman, who was part actually sometimes of his schemes. Not that she knew about the murders, I don't think, but she certainly knew about his schemes, you know, to defraud and, you know, fake deaths and everything else. He was a father, and she said he was a lovely father, and he had you know, animals, and he was a great you know, the family cats and stuff loved him and stuff like that. Oh, I bet they did. But you know, that when we look at serial killers that wear this mask of sanity, as I've said before, you have some killers that are so good at what they do in this manipulation skill, aren't they, of putting themselves out there to look like in public that you're one thing. He knew, and he had these grandiose ideas, didn't he? He wanted to be a doctor. He was a doctor, but then that didn't work really. So then he had to kill off that man and start again as Holmes. So you could tell his mind was never a straightforward mind. It was muddled, because his fantasies probably overtook his normal thought patterns anyway throughout the years. And that's how he then starts to change. His victimology starts to change. He then starts going for women, young children, any kill, because I don't think he was getting the gratification from them kills in the end. He needed something else to stimulate him. And yes, he did keep body parts. He did, and he was fascinated with body parts. But as many serial killers do, they keep body parts to relive what they have done to them people. He loved to torture. These gas chambers is a slow death. And I think the footprint of one of the women victims that he killed, I think the sister of the heiress that he murdered for the land money, her footprint remained on that metal door because of her suffering and how she went into this gas chamber not knowing. She thought she was going to see her sister, and he's gassed her in there. It's a slow, terrible death. He made sure that that combination of chemicals that he used in that gas chamber made her suffer. That was the part, that was the gratification for him, the pain and the suffering. That's what serial killers want. That's what they need. That pain, that kill. They need it. And he was a perfect example of a serial killer, even then. So Holmes had this, didn't he? You know, at this time in this World Fair there in Chicago, this, you know, so-called hotel where he had shops and everything else. But what he had in that basement really was, you know, a killing workshop, really. He had lined a lot of these rooms, as I said, the hotel rooms with gas lines. He also had in his own area on that floor a gas chamber. Plus, don't forget, he even converted the chest box that he used when he had to leave there. He even made that into a gas chamber and would kill people in that. He had lime, acid pits, large vaults, and that vault was, I think, that gas chamber they're talking about. He would torture, suffocate and strangle victims before disposing of their bodies. He would also hang them. So he would, the way that his rooms were designed, and it had these sort of compartments dropping down. One was enough that he could hang his victims literally all the way down, and therefore then just cut them down, and that's the way then that he then had this perfect body. I mean, this man, you could say, was a sophisticated killer for his time, right? But even though all this planning, because he was meticulous in his planning of this hotel and how he wanted it to be done, he still lost. He got deeper and deeper into his fantasies which changed him from being a serial killer for money, if that's what you want to think. And I think most people do think it was a financial gain killing. I don't believe it was just that. It was never ever just that. To where then he went on to be sexually committing crimes for sexual gratification and stuff of victims and females, because that was no longer working for him, that first bit. He needed more. He needed more. What else would this man have gone on to if he wasn't caught when he did? It's really shocking, really, isn't it, when you think about it, that this man got away with it for as long as he did. But the times were different then. And as we talk about different killers, you know, and who came up in the next 60 years after him, got Jeffrey Dahmer, all these sort of killers that came out. But the time they was doing it and the victimology that they was doing the kills to all make a difference in when you're going to get caught and how long it takes to get caught. Because in the end, they're usually always caught. This man though, shocking case, isn't it, really? But very interesting case for those that are interested in the psychology of a serial killer and what really makes a serial killer. Was it his nurture or nature? I don't know with this one. I think with him, yes, I think he was allowed as a child to experiment, a little bit like Dahmer, but I think the nature was already there. The nurture maybe just added to it. But I think what really made him hone his skills was when he went to medical school and where he was allowed, you know, because that was his job, wasn't it, to train as a medical physician, to dissect bodies, to look at the dead for hours and hours and hours. This influenced him even more. This made him become what he was, and that distanced him from understanding about humans as living human things with families, friends, you know, feelings and stuff. He disassociated that, didn't he, from that stage. That's when the separation really happened, to where he saw them as only commodities. And the minute you can detach from seeing someone real to someone that's just a commodity, then you don't see them as human anymore, do you? And so it's easier to kill. And I think that is when the real change for H.H. Holmes came. Is that working for them 20, 30 hours a week with partners dissecting their bodies. That's what then changed him. He was always a serial killer. That just made him detach from reality even more and detach from them and make him one of the most deadliest killers the world has ever seen. So thank you for watching, and until the next time, bye bye.